Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar with Mitchell 1, Using Real-World Information for an Efficient Diagnosis. I'm Shannon Brandyberry, Special Projects Editor with MotorAge. Now, it used to be the repair information meant OEM repair information. That information was licensed from manufacturers and served up to technicians via books in the old days and via the internet starting in the 2000s. In the past couple of years, the market has changed again, with information providers making real-world content readily available to techs. This content is collected in the aftermarket and is based on what is being seen by real repair shops. Today we have Gary Hixson, a Senior Market Manager with Mitchell 1, with us to talk about how real-world information can be used to make your diagnostic repair process even more efficient and save you more time. Gary?
Thank you, Shannon. I'm really happy to be here with you today and to also have the opportunity to share with the MotorAge audience. So the key point for this presentation is that using real-world information like SureTrack is a great way to reduce diagnostic time and to have more confidence when building and carrying out your diagnostic strategy. So I'm going to use a framework today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the diagnostic process. So I broke it down into 5 steps. That is, verify the symptom or complaint. Then we're going to analyze the symptoms, isolate the fault through testing, correct the problem, and then finally check for proper operation. So we aren't necessarily going to use real-world information in every step, but we will rely on real-world information heavily in a couple of the steps. So let's dive in and follow the process through to learn more. All right, the first step I want to start with is, number 1 here, verify the symptom or complaint. So this is really the reason the customer brought the vehicle to you to begin with. Without the symptom, the customer wouldn't be here. We're really doing 2 things in this first step. We are understanding the problem, and then we are replicating the problem. So let's start with understanding the problem. And the first step in the diagnosis happens the moment the customer walks in the door. We're really having a conversation with the customer to find out more about their experience and perception of the problem. So we think of this typically as a service writer task. This is where we're going in and we're asking a lot of questions of the customer to find out what is the problem. Are there any related symptoms? Basically, we're doing our detective work and collecting as much information as possible. Additionally, we want to be able to replicate the problem. The technician has to recreate the problem, and this is where your service writer and technician can work together as a team. Sometimes that can be done in the bay, but often it means driving the vehicle to recreate that customer complaint and to figure out if there's anything additional that's wrong with the vehicle. So within the scope of this first step, verifying the vehicle symptom or complaint, we're going to be interested in identifying any other problems the vehicle might have, and this takes us to our first piece of real-world information. And I want to talk about top 10 lists. So on the screen that I'm showing here, you can see that within SureTrack, we give you top 10 lists, and we show you common replaced components, common DTCs or codes on the vehicle, and also common symptoms. And some application that you may not have thought of at first is that the top 10 list can provide a deeper insight to the service writer or technician, allowing you to look for potential issues beyond the problem for which the vehicle is brought into the shop. So, just diving in here on various items, we can see that there's a number of related issues. So I went through and I underlined in red. If you look under the common related components, you see engine water pump, engine coolant thermostat, and under symptoms you see coolant leaks from vehicle, fluid leaks from vehicle, and engine overheat. So maybe you want to ask Mrs. Smith when she brings that vehicle in, hey, Mrs. Smith, do you notice that there's coolant leaking on your driveway for this vehicle? Or maybe you want to focus on what I have underlined in blue. You can see the fuel filter, fuel pump under common components, or under common DTCs, you see the P0171, 174, and those all have to do with the fuel system. So maybe something the technician can do once the vehicle's in the bay to check out the fuel system and give it an inspection to see if there's anything wrong with it. So again, these are just applications that you can use using real-world information from real aftermarket repair orders to see if there's some common issues with the vehicle that could help you with this diagnosis.
All right. Well, it sounds like the top 10 list can be a great tool to guide a service writer or a technician to ask questions of the customer. In fact, the whole first step of the diagnostic process seems like the service writer, technician, and customer are working together to define the problem. So what is the next step, and what other types of real-world information can we use?
Okay, well that takes us to step number 2 in the process, and that's really analyzing the symptoms. So basically here, we're building a diagnostic strategy. So once we've verified the symptom, it's time to create the strategy for how to solve the problem. This is where you do all your thinking. There's a common phrase we all know called plan the work and work the plan. So in this analyze symptom step, we're going to plan the work. Now right off the bat, you can use scan tools. As we know, there are some very basic tools just to read the codes right out of the vehicle. We're going to start with that as our first step for analyzing the symptoms. So once you pull the code, you can use your OEM information along with the code to better understand what the meaning of that code is for this vehicle, what the set conditions, running conditions, and so on are to better understand your problem. Additionally, we have SureTrack real-world information that we can go to find out more about the issue. So first off, let me backtrack a little bit and just talk about SureTrack information in general and where does this information come from. So within Mitchell 1, we have a database of over 525 million repair orders for this, well, at large, but we also have all those repair orders for a specific vehicle. So for instance, on this example that I'm showing, we got a 2004 Ford pickup, and we have over 770,000 repair orders for just that vehicle. So these are actual aftermarket repair orders, specifically again for this Ford pickup F-150. And then the first thing you'll see as you click onto the SureTrack tab is that you see a graphical representation of, for this code that I'm looking up, what are the common components that get replaced. And we give you that based on mileage also. So that's that common repair procedures graph that you see right in the middle of the page. And in this example, I got a P0301, and it's showing over time what are the most common related components that are replaced. You can also see at the bottom of the page, let me just move my mouse over that we also listed out in list form to give you, just from top to bottom, what are the most common components that would be related to this code or symptom. So using the common repair procedures graph and probable components list, technicians can begin to build a diagnostic strategy. Which component do I want to test first? Which component do I test second? And so on. So one thing I also want to note is that you probably don't want to just pick the first component and just run and begin testing. You definitely want to think about it, use your intuition as a technician, and prioritize your diagnosis. For instance, let's say you have a P0445, which is an evaporative emissions code. Well, you might want to spend just your first minute going and checking the gas cap because that's something easy to do. So that balance between the easy versus the likely is something that you're going to have to balance as a technician. I also have an example for you. So this is something that we can understand how an advanced technician and a beginning diagnostic technician might use the information just a little differently. So this example is a P0191. And again, I'm using it for the Ford F-150 pickup. So if you look up this code, this is a fuel rail pressure sensor code. On this particular vehicle, it means the pressure sensor is out of range, either too high or too low. For a beginning diagnostic technician, they may not have seen this code before. They might need to figure out where to even begin with this code. So they can look at a probable component list and use it as a checklist of sorts to kind of prioritize which components to test out and in what order to do that, because of what is most likely. So they might start with a fuel pump driver module, then move to the fuel filter, fuel pump, and so on. So, just thinking about that, there's a lot of time savings there because it sets you out on the most likely step to prioritize and can save you from going through the OEM procedure. And if you looked at the OEM procedures for the codes, they can be anywhere from 5 to 50 steps, which you follow through in terms of diagnosing. So you get some time savings there in terms of prioritizing what is the most likely. So that's for the beginning diagnostic technician. Now, an advanced diagnostic technician might take a look at this list and say, you know what, I've been doing this for years. I already know, check the fuel filter, fuel pump. What else do you got for me? Well, notice that More button there at the bottom of the page. You can click the More button, and this way, even after you've already checked the 3 or 4 most obvious component issues, you can hit More, and you can take a look at maybe the more obscure issues that might be related to this code. And in this instance, we have an inertia fuel shutoff switch that's been triggered. So maybe that is something that you could check out on this vehicle. As you can see, we actually have seen 2 instances of it in our database where that's been the case in terms of what has caused this code to go on. So for a diagnostic technician, we also give you additional ideas that you may not have thought of that can really help you when you're stuck. And I have one more example here. And what I'm going to look up is a P0171, but I'm going to look it up for 2 different vehicles. So what I want to point out here is that not every vehicle is the same. So again, I'm sticking with my 2004 Ford pickup, F-150, and looking at this P0171 code. It's a lean condition, which has to do with the air-fuel ratio. And so for a Ford F-150, you can see on the list of probable components, it's guiding us to fuel filter, spark plug, ignition coils as the top priorities to look at in terms of diagnosing. Now, let me switch over to a 2004 Chevy, the Silverado 5.3 1500. So really, these are 2 very similar vehicles. Both came out the same year, same style of pickup truck. And when I look at that Chevy Silverado, it's interesting because it's actually leading me to first take a look at the intake manifold gasket, fuel filter, then oxygen sensor as the most likely list of components. So even as a more advanced diagnostic technician, this information can really help you out as part of building your strategy out to help you prioritize which components you want to check out and diagnose first. You can see the time savings there in terms of helping you maybe on the Chevy, that intake manifold gasket's really the main culprit. What's going to lead you right down that path to check that out first.
Okay. Gary, you talked about parts diagnosing, but what about parts swapping? Couldn't a technician use the real-world information to just start changing parts with the component at the top of the list and work their way down? I know I've heard a lot of shops concerned that their techs are using real-world information as a crutch.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon, for bringing that up. That comes up a lot actually in our discussions with shop owners. And at the end of this analyze symptom step, you could part swap, but I want to be clear, Mitchell 1 and Snap-on does not endorse that. Instead, we recommend following the whole diagnostic process, including the additional steps, which I'll get to step 3 here, which is isolating the fault through testing. And to be sure that you have properly identified the components that's at fault. Throwing parts of the problem is costly to the shop, it's costly to the consumer, and it leads to comebacks. And then, as everybody knows, if a customer comes back because they have the same problem with the vehicle, that's probably not going to be a customer that's going to come back to you for additional repairs in the future. So we don't want to see that happen. So you definitely want to move on to step 3 of the diagnostic process, isolating the fault through testing. So again, remember we talked about planning the work and working the plan? Well, step 2 was planning the work. Step 3, isolating the fault through testing, is working the plan. So to start off, Mitchell 1 gives you real fixes. And real fixes, it's a brief case study of a real-world diagnosis giving you complaint cause correction for that case. So as a technician, you can match your code and symptom up to the testing steps to see how you would test that component. And often we'll show you all the steps in the cause section of the real fix. And really, I like to think of it as the silver bullet to help you so that you don't have to go into the OEM repair procedures and that you can just kind of get the Cliff's Notes version of what you need to do. This example that I'm showing is actually for a 2005 Mini Cooper. A common code that comes up is a P1688 for it. And in fact, on this vehicle, it's not too much information that the OEM gives you, but it's too little information. If you look up the OEM information, all they give you is just a definition of what that code is, and it's related to the mass airflow sensor. So as a diagnostic technician, probably just looking at the OEM information, you'd start with going to the mass airflow sensor and starting your diagnosis there. But with the real-world information that we have in SureTrack, you can see that the number one component here is replacing the harmonic balancer. And if you read through it, actually for this vehicle, it looks like the crankshaft fully separates from the harmonic balancer. That's a common problem with this vehicle. So with the real-world information, that can help guide you right to that fix and help you diagnose it a lot faster than you would otherwise. Talking about SureTrack information and real fixes as well, within ProDemand and SureTrack, we have over 36 million real fixes. Just taking a look at what that means compared to other sources of information, we really have the most real fixes available and most sets of real-world information out there. So it really is a good source of real-world information. Also, in this isolate fault through testing step, we have to get to, well, the actual testing. So part of the SureTrack data set that we give you is the component test information. Now, if you're familiar with Snap-on diagnostics and Snap-on, like the Modus and Veris diagnostic tools, you'll know that this component test information has been part of this, part of that product for over 30 years that they've been creating this information, and we folded it into the SureTrack information set as well. So what we really do is give you all the information you need to properly diagnose the components. So this includes the component description, component location, the best test location, connector end views, and what are the best tests to run. Really everything you need to diagnose that component. Additionally, and it's kind of a subset of the component test information, is that we also have a library of known good waveforms. So as you're running a test, you can measure that against a known good to know whether that result that you're getting back on your test, whether it matches up as a good result or a bad result. And just as kind of a side, we also have the largest library of known good waveforms. We have over 775,000 known good waveforms, including pig graphs in our library of information. So lots of great information to use, again, as part of your diagnosis. And also, as part of this step to isolate the fault through testing, we also have our diagnostic equipment that we lean on to run those tests. So just want to mention the oscilloscopes, which is really looking at voltage over time. This is also built in as part of your diagnostic tool if you have a Veris or Modus. We have multimeters, and what you're really doing there is measuring a voltage at a given point. You have smoke machines, and running a smoke test is a common thing to check for leaks. And also specialized equipment like fuel injection testing equipment to test the different specialized systems within the vehicle. Okay, now that we've analyzed the symptoms and isolated the fault through testing, now we're ready to move on to correct the problem, because at this point, we've identified what the component failure is, and we're ready to replace that component. So the basic information you need includes repair procedures, diagrams, specifications, all of which can be found in repair information systems such as Mitchell 1's ProDemand. So at this point, what we're really doing is going back into the OEM information, and we are replacing that component. So if you look in ProDemand, Mitchell 1's been a source of OEM information, and how this relates back to real-world information is that the SureTrack information subset is built into ProDemand itself. So really the OEM information and the real-world information is blended together, so it's all integrated into one. So really it's just a quick step over from the SureTrack information to jump over into the real world information. And those codes that you look up and follow through with the component testing, you can then go into the procedures and it's all linked together within ProDemand, which is really nice. Finish it off real quick here with the diagnostic process. We have step 5 as well, which is the check for proper operation. And this is real quick. We just want to make sure that the problem has gone away and that we successfully completed the job. And what that really means is that we're going to test drive the vehicle as a technician. And basically, we're looking for the original code symptom, and we just want to make sure that everything's been addressed and that we've done all the diagnostic and repair work properly.
All right. Gary, thank you for this overview of how real-world information can be used as part of any technician's diagnostic process. Could we get a quick recap of the types of real-world information that can help all of these technicians and service writers out?
Yeah, sure, Shannon. So really, what I wanted to do today was just take you through the diagnostic process and talk about the steps where we use real-world information as part of that. Starting with when the customer arrives at the shop to help you identify common problems with the vehicle, we had the top 10 lists. To analyzing symptoms, common repair procedures graph, and list of probable components to help you build out that diagnostic strategy. Step 3 there, isolating the fault through testing. This is where you use real fixes as well as specific component test information. And then you move on to correcting the problem, and that's where you go back into your repair information source to look at the OEM information about repairing and that component. And then finally, you want to check for proper operation just to make sure that you've done everything right and completed the job. So, yeah, using a real-world information source like SureTrack, it's a great way to reduce diagnostic time and to have more confidence when building out and carrying out your diagnostic strategy.
All right. Well, Gary, thank you very much for your time today, and to all of the technicians and service writers watching. We hope that this look at how real-world information can be used will help you as you look for new silver bullets to really maximize the information that you have at hand to make your repairs easier. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of the day in your shop.